The wind howled across the silent valley as night fell over the ruined village. Once, this place had been filled with laughter, warm lights, and the sound of music. Now, only broken houses and cold ashes remained. A thin trail of smoke rose from one of the shattered homes. Inside, a young girl named Lyra sat near a dying fire, holding a piece of bread no bigger than her hand. She was an orphan, the last of her family after the war that had burned everything she knew. Every night, she listened to the forest, hoping to hear something other than the wind, some sign that she wasn't alone in this world. That night, something changed. A strange cry broke the silence. It was soft at first, like a whimper, then sharper, almost like a scream. Lyra froze. It came from the forest beyond the edge of the village. No animal she knew made a sound like that. She hesitated, looking out through the broken window, the moonlight cutting through the dark trees. The cries came again, desperate and scared. Against every instinct, Lyra grabbed a small lantern and stepped outside. The forest was heavy with fog. Twisted trees reached upward like claws. The sound grew louder as she walked deeper, a mix of pain and fear. Her heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought it might be a trap. Wolves, maybe, or bandits. But when she reached a clearing, her breath caught in her throat. There, among the ashes of a fallen skyship, lay two tiny creatures. Their scales dim, their wings torn, their bodies trembling. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. Small, yes, but not ordinary. The firelight glimmered on their scales, red and gold, glowing faintly like embers in dying coals. Dragons. Lyra took a step back, her mind racing. Dragons were monsters, that's what everyone said. They had destroyed cities, burned armies, ended the Great Scorch War. But these two, they were just babies. One of them tried to move, but fell weakly onto the ground. The other turned its head and looked at her, its golden eyes wide and wet with fear. It made a low, broken sound, a sound that felt almost human. Her first thought was to run. Her second thought was pity. She looked at the small piece of bread in her hand, her last meal, and then back at them. The little dragon sniffed the air, its tongue flicking. Lyra knelt slowly, her lantern shaking. "You're hungry," she whispered. She tore the bread in half and placed it in front of them. The smaller dragon hesitated, then reached out with trembling claws and began to eat. For a moment, the world was silent again. Lyra sat there, watching as they ate every crumb. The fear in her heart slowly turned to warmth. Maybe they weren't monsters. Maybe they were just lost. She looked around the clearing. The broken skyship, the blackened metal, the strange scorch marks. Something terrible had happened here. She didn't know what, but she could feel it. This was no accident. A gust of wind blew out her lantern. The forest grew darker. She heard a low rumble, deep and far away, rolling across the sky like thunder. The dragons lifted their heads and stared upward, eyes glowing faintly. Lyra followed their gaze. The clouds were moving unnaturally, swirling as if something enormous was stirring within them. She felt a chill crawl down her spine. The air grew heavy and hot, like the breath of a furnace. A faint red light flickered above the clouds. Not lightning, but something else. She could feel it, a pulse ancient and angry. She whispered to herself, "Something's coming." Without thinking, she picked up the two dragon cubs, wrapping them in her torn cloak. They were warm against her chest, their tiny hearts beating fast. She ran through the forest, branches whipping against her arms, roots catching her feet. Behind her, she heard another sound, a roar so deep it shook the earth beneath her. It wasn't close, but it was coming. Lyra reached the edge of the village and ducked into the ruins of an old barn. She laid the dragons down gently on a pile of hay. "You'll be safe here," she said, even though she wasn't sure she believed it. They curled up together, their tails intertwined, glowing faintly with soft light. One of them made a small chirping sound, like a thank you. Lyra smiled weakly. "You need names," she whispered. "Ember and Flint. That sounds right." Outside, the wind roared again. The storm clouds gathered faster than any storm she had ever seen. The sky flashed red, then black. Something massive moved behind the clouds. A shadow with wings wider than mountains. Lyra pressed herself against the barn wall, holding her breath. The dragons whimpered quietly, pressing closer to her. She didn't dare make a sound. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the voice. It wasn't a sound she heard with her ears, but one that burned through her mind. A voice like fire speaking in words older than time. "My children." Lyra's heart nearly stopped. The ground trembled. The barns creaked and moaned under invisible weight. She wanted to scream, to run, but she couldn't move. The voice came again, angrier now. "Who hides them from me?" The air rippled with heat. The smell of smoke filled her lungs. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to no one. "Please, don't find us." Then silence. The roar stopped. The heat faded. The voice was gone. Only the sound of rain filled the air now. Lyra dared to open her eyes. The dragons were asleep, safe, their tiny chests rising and falling. Outside, the storm raged on, but for the first time, Lyra felt something strange in her heart. Hope. She didn't know what those dragons truly were. She didn't know why the voice had called for them. But she knew one thing: they were alone, just like her. And if the world had turned against them, she would not. She looked out the barn window, watching the rain fall like silver threads over the broken village. Somewhere far above, hidden behind the storm, something ancient and powerful was searching. The forest whispered softly around her. The dragons stirred in their sleep. Lyra placed a hand over them and whispered, "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." But even as she spoke, the night sky glowed red for a moment. A faint, distant light moving across the clouds, like the eye of a creature watching from the heavens. The storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, leaving the world wet and silent. Smoke still curled from the ruined fields beyond the village. Lyra sat near the old barn door, her hands wrapped around a small bowl of water. Inside, the two tiny dragons, Ember and Flint, slept close together, their bodies warm, their scales glimmering faintly beneath the soft light. They looked peaceful now, almost harmless. Yet Lyra couldn't forget the voice that had thundered through her mind last night. She didn't know if it was real or just her imagination, but the fear it left behind was heavy in her chest. When the first rays of sunlight touched the floor, Ember stirred. His wings fluttered weakly, and he let out a soft chirp. Flint opened his eyes next, blinking at her with golden pupils that reflected the light like melted metal. Lyra smiled nervously. "You're awake," she whispered, offering them the water. Ember dipped his head to drink, his tiny tongue flicking the surface. Flint followed, bumping into the bowl and spilling some on her hand. Lyra laughed softly for the first time in months. "Clumsy," she said, wiping her fingers. As the day went on, she realized how fast they were growing. The first time she had seen them, they were small enough to fit in her arms. Now, only a few days later, their wings were stronger, and their movements more confident. They began exploring the barn, sniffing everything, their tails knocking over empty buckets and straw piles. Lyra tried to keep them quiet, afraid someone from the nearby patrols might hear. Dragons, even small ones, were forbidden. Anyone caught helping them would be executed. By afternoon, she decided to gather food from the forest. She warned them to stay hidden and covered the barn window with a piece of cloth. "I'll be back soon," she told them. Ember tilted his head, watching her closely, as if he understood. Flint chirped softly, curling back into the hay. The forest was peaceful again. Sunlight filtered through the wet leaves, and birds sang timidly. Lyra gathered berries, mushrooms, and a few leftover apples from an abandoned orchard. She also found something strange: a trail of burned grass leading deeper into the woods. The ground was still warm. She crouched down, touching it carefully. Whatever caused this had happened recently. Her stomach twisted. As she turned to leave, a shadow passed over her. She looked up. A small scout drone, one of the Army's new machines, floated through the trees, scanning the area with a blue light. Lyra froze. The drone paused, its lens focusing on her. She forced herself to smile and wave like a harmless villager. After a few seconds, it moved on, drifting silently into the clouds. Her hands trembled. If that drone had seen the dragons, it would have reported back to the base. She needed to be careful. Back at the barn, Ember and Flint ran toward her the moment she entered. They chirped happily, bumping against her legs like puppies. "Missed me, huh?" she said with a grin. She placed the food down, and they ate quickly, their small teeth crunching through fruit and bread. As they ate, Lyra noticed faint lines glowing under their scales, delicate golden symbols that pulsed like veins of fire. She leaned closer, fascinated. "What are you two?" she whispered. That night, she sat near the dragons as the fire crackled softly. The barn smelled of smoke and warm hay. Flint was sleeping with his head on her lap, and Ember stared into the flames. Lyra talked quietly, telling them stories of her parents, her village before the war, and the stars she used to wish upon. She didn't know if they understood her words, but they listened, eyes glowing gently. When she grew quiet, Ember reached out and brushed her arm with his nose, almost like comfort. For the first time in years, Lyra felt safe. But safety never lasted long in this world. The next morning, the sound of boots woke her. She looked through a crack in the barn wall. 3 soldiers were moving through the village ruins, their rifles slung over their shoulders. They were scanning for survivors or forbidden life forms, as the military called them. Lyra's breath caught. She pulled the dragons deeper into the shadows, covering them with straw. The soldiers stopped near the barn. One of them pointed. "There's heat coming from inside," he said. Lyra grabbed a metal bucket and stepped out, pretending to be surprised. I live here," she stammered. The lead soldier narrowed his eyes. "You live here alone?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. My parents, they're gone. I'm just trying to survive." The soldier stared at her for a moment, then kicked open the barn door. Lyra's heart nearly stopped. Inside, nothing moved. The dragons were silent, hidden beneath the hay. The soldier looked around, frowning. Strange. The scanner picked up something hot. Lyra forced a nervous laugh. "Probably just my fire." After a long pause, the soldier grunted. "Be careful, girl. There are rumors of things in these woods." He turned and walked away. The others followed. When they were gone, Lyra rushed inside. The straw shifted, and 2 frightened faces peeked out. She hugged them both tightly. "You did so well," she whispered. Ember's scales were warm beneath her hands, pulsing like a heartbeat. Later that day, Lyra took them deeper into the forest, far from patrols and machines. They reached a hidden clearing surrounded by ancient trees. It was quiet there, peaceful. "This will be our home now," she said. The dragons chirped in agreement. Over the next few days, Lyra built a small shelter out of fallen wood and stone. The dragons hunted tiny animals, shared their food with her, and followed her everywhere she went. One evening, while she was gathering firewood, she saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. A tall man in a long, tattered cloak. His face was shadowed, but his voice was calm. "You shouldn't be here, girl," he said. "The forest is not safe for your kind." Lyra stepped back, clutching a stick. "Who are you?" she asked. The man smiled faintly. "Once, I was called a dragon speaker. I could understand their voices. But the Empire doesn't like those who talk to dragons." He looked past her, toward the shelter. "You've found hatchlings, haven't you?" Lyra froze. "I don't know what you mean," she lied. He stepped closer. "I can feel them. Their fire is pure royal blood." He paused, his expression darkening. "If they live, their mother will come. And when she comes, nothing will survive her wrath." Lyra's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The man looked at her with pity. "You have done a kind thing, child. But kindness sometimes brings fire." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. The dragons rested peacefully beside her, but his words echoed in her mind. Royal blood. Mother coming. She stared up at the stars, wondering if somewhere beyond those clouds, A creature of unimaginable power was already searching for the ones she had saved. As the moon rose high, a distant sound rolled through the sky, a deep, echoing roar that made the leaves tremble. Ember lifted his head, eyes glowing bright. Flint pressed closer to Lyra, trembling. She held them both tightly, whispering, "It's all right. I'm here." But she knew it wasn't all right. Somewhere above the clouds, something ancient had awakened, and it was coming closer. The following days passed under a strange silence. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something unseen. Lyra tried to pretend everything was normal, but the echo of that deep roar haunted her every moment. The dragons felt it too. Ember would often stop playing, lift his head, and stare toward the sky as if listening to a voice only he could hear. Flint stayed close to Lyra, never letting her wander far from the clearing. Their scales were changing, growing brighter, their markings sharper, glowing faintly even at night like threads of gold fire beneath their skin. One morning, Lyra woke to the sound of distant engines. She froze, then climbed a tree to see above the treetops. Her heart sank. Several airships floated over the valley, their metal hulls glinting in the sun. Soldiers were on board, scanning the ground below. She could see their banners, the insignia of the human dominion, the same army that destroyed her village. Her breath caught. They were searching for something, or someone. By midday, a small patrol of soldiers entered the forest. Lyra's pulse raced. She quickly gathered Ember and Flint into the shelter. "You must stay quiet," she whispered. Ember growled lowly, a flicker of heat curling from his nostrils. Lyra touched his snout gently. "No, no fire. Please, I'll handle it." The dragons blinked at her, understanding her fear. She covered them with thick branches and leaves before stepping out into the sunlight. Through the trees, she saw movement, 3 soldiers scanning the area with portable heat detectors. One of them stopped, looking at his screen. "Sir, I've got something," he said. The officer raised a hand, signaling silence. They moved closer. Lyra's heart pounded. If they found the dragons, they would kill them and her too. She tried to think, to find a way out. Then she noticed a trail of smoke curling near their feet. Flint, frightened, had let out a tiny puff. The nearest soldier turned sharply. "There!" he shouted, raising his rifle. Before Lyra could move, Ember burst from the brush with a loud screech, wings spreading wide. The soldiers stumbled back, shouting in panic. One fired, the bullet struck a tree, sending splinters into the air. Ember's eyes blazed. He opened his mouth, and a wave of hot smoke rolled across the clearing, forcing the soldiers to retreat. Lyra ran to him, grabbing his neck. "Stop! Don't hurt them!" she cried. The soldiers fell back, coughing and blind in the haze. Through the smoke, Lyra dragged Ember and Flint away, deeper into the forest. When they finally stopped, she collapsed on the ground, gasping. Ember looked guilty, lowering his head. Lyra petted him gently. "You saved me," she said softly. "But we can't let them see you again. Not ever." That night, fires burned in the distance. Lyra could see them from the ridge. The army had begun searching the woods with drones and floodlights. She knew it was only a matter of time before they found her hiding place. She sat between Ember and Flint, her thoughts spinning. What could she do? Where could they go? Then, out of the darkness, a voice spoke behind her. "You cannot run forever, girl." Lyra turned sharply, grabbing a stick as a weapon. It was the old man again, the dragon speaker. His tattered cloak blended with the shadows. His eyes gleamed faintly in the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here," Lyra said. "They're searching everywhere." "I know," he said calmly. "They are not the only ones." He stepped closer. "The children you protect, do you know what they truly are?" Lyra shook her head. "Just lost hatchlings." The man sighed. "No. They are heirs of Pyraxis, the Sky Queen, the last ruler of the Dragon Empire. She vanished years ago after the war, and her offspring were believed dead. If she learns that you have them—" He looked at her sadly. "The heavens will burn again." Lyra's chest tightened. Then what do I do? Hide them forever? You cannot hide from the sky, he said. But maybe you can prepare. He reached into his cloak and handed her a small pendant shaped like a flame. This will mark you as a friend to the old blood. When the queen comes, show her this. It may be the only thing that keeps you alive. Before Lyra could ask more, a sharp crack echoed nearby, gunfire. The old man turned toward the sound. They've found you, he said quickly. Go, child. Run. He pushed her toward the shadows. Lyra hesitated, then grabbed Ember and Flint. Together, they fled into the darkness, the old man's cloak vanishing into the mist behind them. They ran until their lungs burned. The forest glowed with the light of search drones sweeping above the treetops. Lyra ducked behind a fallen log as a beam passed overhead. The dragons huddled close, trembling. Suddenly, a drone spotted movement. Its alarm blared, red light flashing. Target located, a metallic voice shouted. Lyra's blood turned cold. The sound of engines roared as soldiers closed in. Ember snarled, his scales flaring bright red. Lyra shook her head. No, stay calm, she whispered, but it was too late. Flint leaped forward, his tiny wings beating furiously. A burst of fire exploded from his mouth, striking the drone and sending it spinning into the trees. Crashed in flames. The forest erupted in shouts and gunfire. Lyra ran with the dragons through the smoke and chaos. Bullets cut through branches. Sparks flew. Ember spread his wings wide, releasing a wave of heat that melted the snow from the ground. Trees caught fire. The soldiers screamed and fell back. Lyra reached a rocky cliff and turned to see the entire valley below her glowing with firelight. Then the wind changed. The air grew heavy and warm again. The same strange pressure she had felt that night returned, stronger than ever. The clouds above twisted and churned, glowing red from within. The dragons froze, their eyes widening. Lyra felt it too, a presence vast and furious. A voice rolled through the heavens, deep and echoing across miles. My children, I have found you. The soldiers stopped firing. The flames bent upward as if pulled by invisible hands. The clouds tore open, revealing enormous glowing eyes like molten suns. Lyra fell to her knees, unable to breathe. A shape moved within the storm. Vast wings, each the size of a mountain, spreading across the sky. Lightning flashed around them, outlining the monstrous form. Ember and Flint cried out, their voices sharp and full of fear. Lyra reached for them, pulling them close. It's her, she whispered. Your mother. The roar that followed shook the ground, sending stones tumbling from the cliffs. Trees bent and snapped. Soldiers screamed and fled in terror. Lyra could only watch as the colossal shadow descended, its eyes burning brighter than any sun. Above her, the sky turned crimson. The queen had come. The night sky burned crimson as the storm split open like a wound. The wind howled through the valley, bending trees and lifting ash into the air. Lyra clutched Ember and Flint tightly, her eyes wide as the clouds parted to reveal an enormous shadow descending from the heavens. The wings were vast, stretching wider than any mountain range, their edges glowing with firelight. The air itself seemed to tremble in fear. The soldiers who had been chasing Lyra dropped their weapons, frozen where they stood. Some fell to their knees whispering prayers. Others simply ran. Then came the roar, a sound so powerful it shattered the stillness of the forest. It was not just loud. It was alive, filled with rage and grief that reached deep into the heart. Lyra covered her ears, her body shaking. The dragons beside her, Ember and Flint, responded with smaller cries, their voices trembling but full of recognition. Their eyes glowed brightly, reflecting the same fire that lit the sky. Through the wall of clouds, the massive figure of Queen Pyraxis appeared. Her scales shone like molten gold, her horns curved like carved blades, and her eyes burned with the light of two dying suns. Every beat of her wings sent waves of heat rolling over the earth. As she descended, the ground cracked beneath her weight, and trees burst into flame from the sheer force of her presence. Lyra could hardly breathe. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Ember stepped forward, his small body trembling but fearless. Flint followed, pressing against his sister for strength. Together, they raised their heads and released soft cries that echoed through the valley. The great dragon queen stopped, her enormous head lowered, eyes narrowing. Her voice filled the air, not spoken aloud but echoing inside every mind around her. "My children, who dares to touch you?" Her gaze swept across the burning forest and fell upon the fleeing soldiers. The fire in her throat brightened. With one mighty exhale, a wave of golden flames spread across the sky, turning the night into day. The soldiers vanished in an instant, their weapons melting, their cries lost in the roar of the inferno. Lyra shielded her face from the heat, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, to stop the destruction, but her voice was lost beneath the wind. Pyraxis's wings spread wide again, and the storm clouds broke apart completely. The stars above flickered, dimmed by her presence. When the firestorm faded, only silence remained. The queen's gaze turned back toward the small figures of Ember and Flint, and then to Lyra standing between them. The air shimmered with tension. Lyra could feel the queen's power pressing down on her like the weight of a mountain. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but something inside her refused. She took a step forward instead. Her voice shook as she spoke. "They were hurt, alone. I found them after the crash. I only wanted to help." The queen's eyes glowed brighter. "Help!" The word echoed in her mind, filled with disbelief and fury. "Your kind hunted us. You burned our nests. You took the skies from us." "I'm not like them," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know who they were. I just couldn't leave them to die." She looked down at the dragons, who pressed close to her legs. "They needed someone, that's all." For a long moment, Pyraxis said nothing. The wind howled through the valley, carrying smoke and ash. Then, slowly, the queen lowered her head until her enormous golden eye was level with Lyra. The reflection of the human girl flickered in the dragon's gaze. Small, fragile, but unbroken. The queen studied her in silence. Then, in a voice softer but still terrible in its power, she asked, "You fed them? You kept them safe from your own kind?" Lyra nodded, too afraid to speak. Something in the queen's expression changed. The fury in her eyes dimmed slightly. Her great nostrils flared, and she released a long breath that sent waves of warm air across the clearing. Ember and Flint chirped softly and ran toward her, touching their small heads against her massive claw. Pyraxis looked down at them with something almost like tenderness. Then she turned her gaze back to Lyra. "You have done what few of your kind would ever dare. You showed mercy to fire. That is not forgotten." Lyra swallowed hard. "Please, don't destroy them," she said, gesturing toward the ruins of the valley. "They're just soldiers. They didn't know." The queen interrupted her with a low growl. "They raised weapons against my blood." Lyra took another shaky step forward. "And if you kill them all, what then? Will that bring peace? Or will it start another war?" Her words hung in the air. For a long moment, Pyraxis said nothing. Then, to Lyra's shock, the massive dragon's eyes softened. "You speak boldly, small one," she said. "There is fire in you, but it does not burn to destroy." A strange calm fell over the valley. The clouds began to fade, the storm easing. The glow around Pyraxis dimmed to a gentle light. The air smelled of rain and smoke. She looked down once more at her children, who were now resting against her leg, safe and content. Then she turned her gaze toward the horizon. "The world of men grows restless again," she said quietly. "They build their weapons, their machines. They forget who once ruled the skies." Lyra's heart pounded. "Then what will you do?" The queen looked at her for a long moment. Then she lowered her head until her enormous face was inches from Lyra. The heat of her breath washed over the girl's skin. "You saved what is mine," Pyraxis said. "For that, the debt of fire is yours. You will come with us." Lyra stared at her, confused. "With you? To where?" "To the sky," the queen replied simply. To the home of dragons, above the clouds, where no human dares to fly. There your fate will be decided. Before Lyra could protest, Pyraxis unfurled her wings. The sound was like thunder cracking through the heavens. The ground shook. Dust rose in a storm around them. Ember and Flint chirped excitedly, climbing onto their mother's back. Lyra hesitated only a moment, then reached out and grabbed a thick ridge of Pyraxis's golden scales. The dragon queen launched into the air with a roar that shook the mountains. The world below became a blur of light and shadow as they rose higher and higher, piercing through the last layer of storm. The clouds broke apart, and Lyra gasped. Above them stretched a world of endless color, rivers of light flowing through the air, islands of crystal floating among the stars, and the faint glow of other dragons soaring far in the distance. The air shimmered with golden mist, warm and alive. She clung tightly as Pyraxis soared higher still. Beneath them, the world of men faded away into darkness. Ahead, the vast gates of the sky realm opened like fire-tipped wings. Lyra's heart raced. She didn't know what waited for her there. Judgment, destiny, or death. But one thing she knew for certain. Her life, and the fate of two worlds, had just changed forever. The moment Queen Pyraxis broke through the final layer of storm, the world transformed. The sky was no longer gray or heavy. It was endless and bright, painted with streams of light that moved like living fire. The air shimmered with gold dust, and great floating islands drifted among the clouds like slow, graceful ships. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. It was as if she had left the mortal world behind and stepped into a dream made of flame and wind. She clung tightly to the queen's back as they soared higher, passing through arches of glowing mist and bridges made of light. Ember and Flint flew beside them now, their wings strong, leaving trails of orange sparks behind. They chirped happily, no longer weak or frightened but alive with joy. Below them, the clouds rolled like oceans, and far in the distance, Lyra saw shadows moving. Other dragons, hundreds of them, flying in formation. Some were small and sleek, others vast as mountains. Their scales reflected the sunlight like gemstones. It was a kingdom in the sky. When Pyraxis landed, the ground was made of smooth stone that shimmered like molten glass. The air was warm and filled with a low humming sound, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Lyra slid off the queen's back and stood unsteadily, staring around. Towers carved from crystal rose above her, connected by bridges of firelight. Dragons of all colors watched from perches and cliffs, their eyes glowing with curiosity and suspicion. A deep voice spoke from behind her. A human dares to enter the sky realm? Lyra turned to see a massive bronze dragon descending, his scales dark and scarred from old battles. His eyes burned like coals. "This is forbidden," he growled. "No mortal may walk here." Queen Pyraxis's wings flared slightly, casting the ground in red light. "She comes by my will," the queen's voice thundered. "She saved my children when your kind would have hunted them. She bears the debt of fire." The bronze dragon bowed his head, though his tone remained cold. "Then she will stand before the council. Let them decide her fate." Lyra's pulse raced as she followed the queen into a vast hall carved inside a mountain of glass. The walls glowed from within, veins of flame moving through the crystal like rivers. Around a circular dais sat 7 great dragons, each one older and larger than she had ever imagined. Their eyes followed her as she entered, sharp and unreadable. One, with silver scales and calm blue eyes, spoke first. "You are human?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." "You harbor our kind," another said, his voice rough like grinding stone. "Why?" Lyra hesitated, feeling small beneath their gaze. "Because they needed help," she said. "They were hurt, alone. I couldn't leave them to die." A murmur went through the council, some disbelieving, some thoughtful. The silver dragon leaned forward. "Do you understand what they are, child? Those 2 you saved are heirs of the Sky Queen. If they had perished, our race would have fallen to chaos." Lyra's eyes widened. I didn't know. Yet your heart acted when your mind could not." said Queen Pyraxis. "She risked her life for our blood. For that, she will not be judged as prey." The bronze dragon snorted. "We cannot trust her, my queen. Humans are the reason our kind hides in the clouds. They built machines that kill from afar. They hunt our eggs, they desecrate the skies. You would bring one of them into our heart." The queen's gaze hardened. "You forget yourself, Theron." Her voice cut through the hall like thunder. "This human showed mercy where your kind showed fear. She saved what even you would not." Silence followed. Lyra stood still, feeling the weight of their judgment. The silver dragon finally spoke again. "Perhaps she should stay for a time. Let her see the truth of what humanity has done. If she still stands with us after that, then she will have earned her place." The queen nodded. "So it shall be." And so Lyra stayed. Days passed, or perhaps weeks, for time moved differently in the sky realm. She was given a small chamber overlooking a sea of clouds, and every morning she watched dragons soar through the light, training in patterns of flight that looked like living constellations. Ember and Flint visited her often, growing larger each day. They practiced breathing small jets of flame, laughing in their own way as they tumbled through the air. Lyra began to learn the history of their world, of how dragons once ruled the skies peacefully, keeping balance between land and air, until humans discovered weapons that could pierce the heavens. Fear had replaced trust, and the Great Scorch War had nearly ended them all. Pyraxis had withdrawn her people to the hidden realm, sealing the skies from mortal eyes. But peace could never last. One evening, as Lyra stood near the edge of the cliffs, she saw something strange far below. Flashes of light beneath the clouds, like explosions. Then she heard it, a faint, familiar sound, the hum of human engines. She ran to Pyraxis, who stood upon a high balcony overlooking the storm lair. "It's them," Lyra said breathlessly. "The humans. They found a way up here." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. No human craft has ever pierced the veil." "Not before," Lyra said. "But now they have." Another explosion thundered below, sending shockwaves through the air. A burning shape rose from the storm. A massive ship, its hull glowing red with stolen dragonfire energy. The bronze dragon Theron roared. "They bring war to our gates." Queen Pyraxis spread her wings, her expression dark. "They use our own power against us," she said grimly. Stolen flame, broken oaths. Lyra's heart sank. She recognized the markings on the ship, the same army that had destroyed her village. They had followed the trail of the hatchlings, followed her. The queen turned to Lyra, her golden eyes blazing. "You know their kind. You know their hearts. Tell me, child of men, what do they want?" Lyra swallowed hard. "Control," she said quietly. "They want to rule even the sky." Pyraxis looked toward the horizon, her voice low but fierce. "Then they shall learn what it means to steal from dragons." The council gathered behind her, their wings spreading, their scales igniting with inner light. Lyra could feel the power rising in the air, ancient, unstoppable. But she also knew what would come if dragons and humans clashed again. The world below would burn. She stepped forward, trembling but determined. "Let me go down there," she said. "Let me stop them before this turns into another war." The hall fell silent. The queen turned slowly toward her. "You would return to them? After all they took from you?" Lyra nodded. "If I can make them listen, maybe we can still save both worlds." For a long moment Pyraxis said nothing. Then she lowered her great head until her glowing eyes met Lyra's. "You are brave, little one. Foolish, but brave." The queen's voice softened. "Then go. Deliver my fire to those who have forgotten mercy." Lyra took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of destiny pressing on her shoulders. Ember and Flint came to her side, their wings gleaming in the light. They would not let her go alone. As they prepared to descend through the clouds, Pyraxis's voice echoed behind them. "Remember, Lyra, the debt of fire binds us. What you do now will decide the fate of two worlds." The sky darkened once more as the human warship rose higher. Lyra gripped the dragon's scales, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the storm below. The time for hiding was over. The fire of dragons and the courage of one human was about to be tested. The storm screamed like a living thing as Lyra and the young dragons descended. Wind tore at her cloak, lightning flashed around them, and the clouds below glowed red from the engines of the human warship. Ember and Flint circled her protectively, their wings cutting through the thunder. Lyra's heart pounded, her hands shaking as she looked down at the enormous craft rising through the storm. The ship was vast, metal scales covering its body, engines roaring with stolen fire. On its sides burned the same insignia she had seen on the soldiers who once destroyed her home. This was their creation, a machine powered by dragon essence, built from the remains of the creatures they had hunted. Her throat tightened. "They've gone too far," she whispered. Ember growled, a low rumble like distant thunder. Flames flickered between his teeth, but Lyra shook her head. "No, not yet. We're not here to destroy them. We're here to make them understand." The ship's searchlights cut through the clouds, blinding her. A voice echoed through the storm, metallic and cruel. "Unidentified flyers, you are in restricted airspace. Surrender immediately or be fired upon." Flint hissed and darted closer to Lyra as bolts of energy shot past them. One blast grazed Ember's wing, sending a shower of sparks into the wind. Lyra screamed, clutching the young dragon's scales. "Stop! We're not your enemy," she cried. But no one heard her. Below, on the ship's deck, soldiers scrambled to reload the glowing cannons. The hum of stolen dragonfire grew louder. It was alive, wild, unstable, and Lyra could feel it burning the air around her. The humans had captured dragon flame but never learned to control it. The weapon began to glow brighter, its light turning from gold to white. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. "They're overloading it. If they fire that, it'll tear the ship apart." She urged Ember and Flint downward, racing toward the metal beast. The wind howled, and heat pressed against her face. She could see through the smoke now the command deck where a man stood in front of a glowing control panel. And then she froze. She knew that face. Captain Rowan, the same man who had led the raid on her village years ago. Her chest tightened, anger and fear twisting inside her. For a heartbeat, she wanted to let the dragons burn everything. But then she remembered Pyraxis's voice. "The debt of fire binds us. Mercy is the only flame that does not destroy." Lyra took a deep breath and jumped. She landed hard on the deck, rolling to her feet as alarms screamed around her. Soldiers turned, weapons raised, but she shouted over the noise. "Stop! You're going to kill us all." Rowan's eyes widened as he recognized her. "You?" His voice was cold, disbelieving. "You were supposed to be dead." "I lived," Lyra said. "And you're about to destroy everything that's left of both our worlds." He laughed bitterly. "You don't understand, girl. We're fighting back. They burned our cities. They took our skies. This ship is the only way humanity survives." "They didn't burn your cities," Lyra shot back. "They hid from you. They're not the monsters you are. For what you've done to them." A beam of light erupted beside them, shaking the ship. Ember and Flint had landed on the edge, their scales glowing with fury. Soldiers panicked, backing away as the young dragons spread their wings. Rowan's hand trembled over the control panel. "You think they'll let us live? They'll come for all of us eventually." "Not if we stop this now," Lyra said quietly. "If you fire that weapon, you'll start a war that no one can win." For a moment, the storm outside went silent. Only the sound of the overloading engine filled the air. The white light inside the weapon was growing unstable, pulsing faster and faster. Lyra could feel it. The stolen fire was alive, screaming in pain. Rowan looked at her, torn between fear and pride. "Even if I wanted to stop it, it's too late." Lyra's heart sank. The weapon was going to explode. Then a roar split the clouds. The storm tore open as Queen Pyraxis descended like a comet, her wings igniting the air. The ship trembled under her presence. Every soldier froze as her shadow fell across them. You dare steal from the heart of flame? Her voice thundered, shaking the sky. Rowan stumbled back, pale with terror. Dear God! Lyra ran to the control panel, searching for a way to release the core. There has to be a vent system, something. Ember and Flint landed beside her, their eyes glowing bright. The Queen's voice echoed in her mind. The fire they stole must be returned. Guide it back to me, child. Lyra hesitated. How? You carry the spark, Pyraxis said. You are the bridge between our worlds. Call it home. Lyra pressed her hand to the glowing crystal core. The heat was unbearable, but she didn't move. The fire seared her skin, but she whispered softly, Come back. You don't belong here. Light surged through her veins. She felt the dragonfire awaken inside the machine, twisting toward her hand. It recognized her, the one who had cared for its kind. The flames turned from violent white to gentle gold, flowing up through her arm, through the storm, and into the Queen's waiting breath. Pyraxis inhaled deeply, reclaiming the stolen fire. The storm dimmed, and the engines of the ship sputtered out. The weapon died with a final hiss. When the light faded, Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but alive. Ember and Flint pressed close, their warm scales against her trembling hands. Rowan stared at her, stunned. You saved us. Lyra looked up at him, her voice hoarse. No, we saved both of you. The Queen lowered her head, her voice a soft rumble now. You have done what even I could not. You bridged fire and flesh, mercy and war. The debt is fulfilled. Lyra stood slowly, her body weak but her heart steady. Then it's over? She asked. Pyraxis looked toward the horizon, where sunlight now broke through the clouds. For now. But remember, child of men, peace is not the end. It is only the pause before choice. What you choose next will decide what becomes of us all. She spread her wings, and the light of dawn bathed the storm-torn sky. Ember and Flint rose with her, their laughter echoing through the clouds as they disappeared into the golden mist. Lyra stood on the silent deck, wind in her hair, watching them vanish into the light. For the first time, the sky felt vast, not as a battlefield but as a home. And somewhere deep inside her, the flame she carried still burned, not to destroy, but to guide. The fire of hope. She saved 2 baby dragons, and in the end, they saved her world. The girl who fed fire became its keeper, the bridge between dragons and men. But peace is fragile, and above the clouds, the embers still glow.